I don't know what your favorite movie is, but let me tell you what I think is true, okay? I think the best movies, in fact, I'll even back away from the movie thing, I think the best stories are always underdog stories. I love a good story of somebody that the odds are stacked against, or it's like they don't have a prayer of like winning or surviving or, fill in the blank, whatever it is. I love a good underdog story. I love a long shot story. I love a story of a kid who has a dream and they aspire to something, and it's like the story of them chasing that dream. Or I love stories of people who are just trying to get their shot. Like I've spent all weekend watching the Rocky movies. Any Rocky fans? And I've been watching them all weekend by myself because my wife thinks they're old and boring and she won't watch them with me. But they're great movies and she's wrong, okay? And I'm saying that while there's a good distance between us, but I'm right, okay? They're good movies. Here's why I love the Rocky movies. I love the Rocky movies. She's leaving. I love the Rocky movies because it's the story of this struggling young boxer he's trying to get his shot and he just can't catch a break, and then all of a sudden, just this crazy turn of events happens and he gets a shot and he takes it and he makes it, and it's just, man, I get hyped every time I watch the Rocky movies. I love those stories. Well, I say that because we're getting ready to, in fact, just right now, like we're gonna start a new teaching series today. We've been in the same series for 2 months, so we're turning a page today. We're gonna start something new. And this series is called Legendary. And here's what the series is all about. It's just simply this. We want you, and God wants you to live a life that's legendary. We want you to live a life that is gonna have impact even beyond your years. We want you to be somebody that even after you're gone, like long gone, and people have forgotten your name, the impact that you've made in the world around you is gonna last. It's gonna carry on, especially the impact that you make in Jesus' name. That's the kind of life that Jesus wants you to live, and man, that's the kind of life we want you to live too. But if you're gonna have that kind of impact, and just like a little kid in a great story that's got a dream and they chase that dream, like if you're gonna live your life to have that kind of impact, you've got to be intentional and you've got to have a plan. And so our goal today and in the next few weeks is to give you a plan so that you can be intentional about living a life that leaves a legacy. So if that sounds good to you, then I just want to encourage you for a few weeks to lean in. Because I'll bet if you will, and if you will pray through this and process through this and set some goals through this and just walk through this series and even beyond this, and if you will formulate a plan and if you'll commit to that kind of intentionality, you'll begin to see immediate impact in the world around you. And that's what we want for you. And again, that's what God wants for you, okay? So let me start here. About 15 years ago, I met this guy named Dean. Dean grew up in Ireland. He was over in the States staying with a family that he knew, visiting on a break from university. And they got sick of him after a few days, so they dropped him off in my office and said, here, you entertain him. And we became best friends like instantly, okay? And so we hung out all summer long. And the last weekend before he went back to school, we were trying to figure out what to do for his last weekend in the States. And he said, you know what? I've always wanted to see Niagara Falls and I've never been there. And so I said, no problem, let's go. So we jumped in the car and we drove a few hours up to New York to go see Niagara Falls. Well, we get there and Dean had programmed the GPS, okay? He'll tell you differently, but again, I'm right, okay? So Dean had programmed the GPS and it was all good until like we got through Buffalo and we're kind of like going up the highway and the GPS said turn left. And so I hadn't been there since I was a kid. I didn't think anything of it. So I turned left and next thing I know, we're on a bridge to Canada. Now, it's not that big a deal because this was, again, 15 years ago. I could get in and out of America with just my driver's license. But I didn't know until I saw the panicked look on Dean's face that there was something in his passport called a CVIS that he needed. And here's what this does, okay? Like when you come into America as a visitor, you get your visa and then there's something that you need to be able to leave America and come back again. And he had that thing, but he didn't bring it on this road trip. He left it in Ohio. And so we get to the Canadian border and we pull up to the little booth. You know, it looks just like a toll booth. And the guard says, hey, I need your ID. And so I hand him my driver's license and I hand him Dean's passport. And he immediately spots the problem. Dean doesn't have this thing that he needs. And so he says, guys, we got to work this out. Here's what I need you to do. I just pull right over into this parking spot, and he kind of pointed to a parking spot. Just pull right in over here. It was like, there's trees and picnic tables and the river's running right by. It's like beautiful, right? He's like, just pull into that parking spot, go inside, and we're gonna straighten this out. So we said, no problem. So I drive into the parking spot, and immediately I found out this guy sold us a wrong idea of what happened, because the minute I parked my car and turned it off, we were surrounded by armed guards who took my car keys, and they led us inside, and they put us in a little room with no windows, and we waited for 2.5 hours before we saw another human. The whole time I'm thinking, there's no way I die in Canada. This is not how it's gonna go. I don't know what he did, but I'm not going out like this, right? Because 2.5 hours, you start to think things, okay? So 2.5 hours later, this guy comes in, he's asking us what's going on, and we're trying to explain this was all an accident, we didn't mean to come here, and he says, well, you haven't officially made it into Canada, and so we're just gonna pretend this never happened, we're gonna let you turn around, and you can just go home. And we said, that's great, just get us out of here, right? So we go back to the car, we turn around, and we come back, except here's the problem. We didn't make it into Canada, but we did make it out of America. And we were in like this little like gray area between countries. I didn't even know that existed, but we were in it somehow, okay? And so we get to the American border, and we pull up to the little booth, and the guard says, can I have your ID? And we hand him our ID, and he says, hey guys, we have a problem, but we need to work this out. And I thought, I know what happens next. I was ready for it this time, right? And so we park and we go inside, and we wait almost 5 hours before somebody came to work through this with us. Now, here was the worst part, okay? When a guy finally came to talk to us, he asked what happened, we explained it, he took Dean's passport and went, no problem, you're free to go. And I was like, you couldn't have done that in 15 minutes? It took 5 hours for that? But he let us go. Now, here's why I tell you the story. I tell you this story because when you're on a road trip or when you're on a journey, sometimes things don't go as planned, and the people who are in the car with you can make or break you. Okay? When you are on a journey, and we all are, the people who are with you on the journey can make or break you. And when things don't go as planned, and it's gonna happen sooner or later, you need people on the journey with you who are going to make you and not break you. Now let me ask you a question. Simple question. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Have you ever thought about that? What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Where do you want to go? Because you are on a journey, and you get to pick the destination. You get to choose which direction do I want to go, which road do I want to travel, what path do I want to take, and what goals am I going to set for along the way and for when I get there, and ultimately, like, where do I want to end up? You get to decide. So what do you want your life to look like in 5 years? That's an important question that you need to process. And here's a truth that I've learned along the way. And I want to share this truth with you today because I think this truth is so true. And let me just say that if you're somebody and you're here this morning or you're watching online, you're listening, and you would say, I haven't started to follow Jesus yet, let me just back away from the subject of Jesus and faith for a second. Let me just say that a lot of what we're talking about this morning still applies to you, and so does this truth, because here's the truth. You ready? I have found that our success in life hinges far less on our ambition and what we want to do, and it hinges far more on the company that you keep today. And now let me step back toward the faith thing, and let me just say, I have found that your success in life hinges far less on your ambition and what you want to do for God than it does on the company that you keep today. And if you surround yourself with the wrong kind of company, then you will find that it won't take very long for your destination to shift, and you won't achieve the goals you want to achieve in that place you want to end up down the road. You may not end up there, but if you will surround yourself with the right kind of people, and we're going to talk about that for a few minutes this morning, then you will find that you might just end up where you want to be. Okay, so if you have a Bible, open up to Proverbs chapter 15. It's in the Old Testament. It's just over halfway through the Bible. And we're going to look at one verse this morning in a few minutes. We're going to look at another passage first, but I'm going to read it to you, and it'll be on the screen, so don't go there. Go to Proverbs chapter 15, and we're going to look at that. And as we're reading this, I want you to remember and consider that truth, that when you are on a road trip or when you're on a journey, sometimes things don't go as planned, and the people who are around you can make you or break you. We're going to see that come true in the passage I'm about to read you. Let me give you some context, okay? So The early church is just getting going. Like in the passage we're about to read, the movement is just picking up steam. Jesus has been teaching his followers, his apostles for a few years, and then he returns to heaven. He leaves them to do this thing on their own, and they're spreading the news. They're teaching people. They're reaching out to people. The Bible says thousands of people are being added to their numbers every single day, okay? The movement is gaining momentum. But as we talked about a couple weeks ago, we said anytime that you're trying to do anything for Jesus, you're gonna face opposition, right? Well, that was true for the movement, okay? They're facing opposition from the Jewish religious leaders, and they're facing opposition from the government, and they're facing opposition because some of these people grew up Jewish and they walked away from their tradition to become a part of this brand new movement that was called the Way, because they didn't have the term Christian, that it was too soon. So they called themselves the Way because Jesus had said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and nobody comes to the Father but through me. And so they just called themselves the Way, okay? And so they left their tradition behind, and so they're facing opposition even from their own family and from their own friends. It's everywhere they turn. And more than opposition, guys, it's persecution. Just before the passage we're going to read in a second in Acts chapter 9, if you back up just a little bit, we see the story of a guy named Stephen who became the very first person that we know of who was murdered for his faith, for following Jesus. He was martyred. Took him out in the street and they threw stones at him until he died. And as this is happening, there's this guy named Saul who's standing by, and the Bible doesn't say that Saul threw any stones, but it does say that he stood there and he held the coats of the guys who were murdering Stephen for following Jesus. Now this guy Saul, he was like up and coming in the scene for like persecution, right? He was very educated in the Jewish religious system. He had some political clout and authority, and he had made it his mission to seek out followers of Jesus and to arrest them and put them in prison, and ultimately many of them were killed. And the Bible doesn't explicitly say that Paul personally killed anybody, but even some of the things he wrote would let us to believe that he considered himself one of the guilty parties. Okay, so he's up and coming. And again, he's on this mission to find these followers of Jesus and to arrest them and to kill them. And so here's what happens in Acts chapter 9 as Saul is about to have an encounter that's going to change his whole life. Check this out. Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 1, it says this. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues, the Jewish churches in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the Way, that's the movement, remember, if he found any who belonged to the Way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. So Saul thinks, man, I've about arrested everybody I can here in the city. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so he picks this town called Damascus, about 150 miles away. It's about the distance from Cleveland to Columbus. He says, I'm going to walk there. He walked all that way. It was a week's journey on foot just to find more Christians to persecute, just to find more followers of Jesus to arrest, just to find more members of this brand new movement to imprison and to oppress, right? I'm going to walk all that way just to go find them. And so verse 3 says, as he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. And he fell to the ground and he heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. And I want to point out that Lord does not mean like sometimes we call Jesus Lord. That's not what Saul was doing here. That was just a way to say sir in their culture. So what he's saying is like, who are you, sir? Like, who is this? It's bright light in your face, you know? He's freaked out. Who are you, sir? This was the voice. It said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now notice, Jesus doesn't say, hey, I am Jesus. Leave my people alone. I'm Jesus. Stop picking on my guys. He says, I am Jesus. You're persecuting me. Now get up and go into the city and you'll be told what you must do. And that's it. The whole encounter, that was it. It's over, okay? Now, verse 7, the men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but they didn't see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. He was blinded. The light from this encounter with Jesus was so bright, he'd gone blind. He couldn't see anything. So they led him by hand into Damascus. And for 3 days, he was blind and he didn't eat or drink anything. He's so freaked out, so shook up, so messed up by this experience, he couldn't even eat or drink. He just sat there for 3 days trying to process what in the world just happened to him, right? So verse 10 says, in Damascus there was a disciple named Ananias, a follower of Jesus. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. Yes, Lord, he answered. The Lord told him, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he's seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight. Now, Ananias has heard of Saul, okay? And we know that because check out his reply in verse 13. He says, Lord, I've heard many replies about this man and all the harm he's done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And you want me to go where and find who? I'm paraphrasing. You want me to go, like he's here to find me and put me in jail, and he's gonna mess my life up, and you want me to go find who? And you want me to go talk to who? He says he's come here with authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. Man, I know why he's in town. God, what are you crazy? We have a bad connection? What am I hearing? But the Lord said to Ananias, go. This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel, and I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. And then Ananias went to the house and he entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who has appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And immediately something like scales fell from Saul's eyes and he could see again. And he got up and was baptized, and after taking some food, he regained his strength. Now let me pause right here and let me point something out. And this is very important for what we're going to talk about here with the time we have left. And it's just this truth. I think it is so crazy and so powerful that Saul, who's just traveling down the road, has this encounter with Jesus. And he comes face to face with Jesus on the road, bright light, there he is, here's the voice, they have a conversation, he comes face. I don't know about you, but I've never had that kind of encounter with Jesus. I've never just been, driving like Cleveland to Columbus. Can you imagine like driving down 77 and all of a sudden, where are you going? I've never had that encounter with Jesus. I've never come face to face with him and heard in an audible sense, Jesus ask me anything or say anything. And I don't know if you have, but check this out. Paul comes face to face with Jesus Christ himself. And it's Jesus Christ himself who leads Paul to Jesus, right? And the first thing he tells him is, I got to get some people around you to teach you some stuff. Now, if Saul comes face to face with Jesus, and it's important for him to get some people in his life right away to mentor him and to teach him and to educate him and to train him for the work that God wanted him to do, then how much more important is it for me and for you to have people in our lives who are going to do the same thing for us? Because if Paul can come face to face with Jesus and the first thing Jesus says is, go into the city, I'm going to send somebody to you, they're going to help you, then man, I have no excuse to say I don't need people to help me too. Okay, so here's what happens as we look at the last couple verses. Verse 19, picking back up there. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. Look at that, just like that. Like he showed up in town to find Christians, and now he's trying to make Christians. That's what an encounter with Jesus will do to you, messes your whole life up, okay? It says, all those who heard him were astonished. And they asked, isn't this the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests? Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. And it goes on in verse 23 to say he stayed many days. And we know that many days actually meant 3 years because Paul writes about that later in Galatians. See, Saul went on to become Paul, changed his name. I probably would too if I was known for, killing Christians and I wanted them to like me. I think I'd probably, change my Facebook profile around a little bit. So he changes his name to Paul and he starts teaching and he starts planting churches. This guy, he planted dozens of churches. that became hundreds of churches, that became thousands and tens of thousands of churches. Over the last 2,000 years, dozens and hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands of followers, even millions of followers of Jesus, because one guy had a face-to-face encounter, and then God put the right people in his path to get him ready for the work that God was going to send him out to do. And God had a mission for him. Now, what that tells me is that when we are starting a journey with Jesus, and when we are on a journey with Jesus, we need people to come alongside of us, to walk on that journey with us, to maximize the impact that we're going to have in our lives for God. If Paul needed it, man, I sure do. Now, I want to tell you something. You are on a journey. Whether you've ever thought of your life as a journey or not, I don't know. Maybe you haven't. But you are on a journey. And you are not made to do life alone. And some of us try. And maybe you've been trying. And maybe you're not happy with the outcome of that so far. Maybe you're feeling lonely, or maybe you're feeling depressed, or maybe you're feeling the lack of fulfillment and success and the things that you're trying to do in life. Maybe it's because, if you're honest, you're trying to do it by yourself. If we learn one thing about ourselves over the last couple of years through the pandemic, it is that we need each other. Sociologists and psychologists tell us that the damage done on an anxiety and stress and depression level, on a loneliness level, we're not even going to see the full impact of that for years, maybe even decades to come. And we need each other, because you are not made to do life alone. You are on a journey, and the destination is much more likely to be reached if you have people alongside you who are going to help you get there. And so what I want to do is I just want to give you 3 quick travel tips. And if you will put these into practice in your life, I'll bet your odds of reaching your destination are going to increase. And so here's the first tip. It's pretty simple. It's just, don't travel alone. Don't travel alone. Again, you need people. I need people. We need people. Life is better with friends. It's better in community. And we need each other. You think about the Rocky movies. Man, he got his shot, right? This opportunity for Rocky comes about that he never saw coming. But if it hadn't been for the trainer, Mickey, who taught him how to fight. I mean, Rocky, man, if you've seen the movies, the thing he was best at was blocking punches with his face. He was not a good boxer. And Mickey said, "You're going to get yourself killed, kid. I got to teach you how to fight," right? So he had this guy who trained him and he taught him. And we need that. We need people in our lives, because we shouldn't travel alone. We're not made to do life alone. If you have Proverbs 15 open, look at verse 22 with me. It's a really simple verse. And if you have it, underline it, highlight it, circle it, whatever you got to do not forget this verse, because this is some good wisdom right here. And let me just say, even if you don't believe in Jesus, this is still pretty good stuff. So circle it anyway. If you don't have a Bible, I don't know, write it on your hand, okay? Here we go. Without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. That's pretty simple, right? Without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. You need people around you to help you, because the more people you have to gain wisdom from, the more likely you are to succeed. And let me just say this, a couple things. Don't just gravitate toward acceptance. What we tend to do is we tend to just surround ourselves with people that we have shared interests or hobbies, or we like the same music or the same restaurants or something like that. But the problem is, that's not much intentionality in terms of the people that you allow to have influence in your life. And so it's not a great way to pick your friends. And I don't know if you've ever thought about picking your friends. Maybe that sounds weird, like, am I supposed to interview them? I ask them questions before they become my friend. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But what I am saying is this: don't just gravitate toward acceptance. Instead, rather than just looking for people who share your hobbies or your interests or your likes, look for people who share your values. Look for people who share your values. I used to say this all the time when I was a youth pastor. I say this to my students. If you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You show me the people that are around you in your life, and I'll show you the direction you're headed, and I can predict it, okay? Your friends determine the direction and the quality of your life. And so who is around you, and who is influencing you, and what direction are you going? Because your friends determine the direction and the quality of your life. And man, if you show me your friends, I'll bet I can show you your future. But here's the important part. just don't travel alone. As you're figuring out who's gonna be around you, get people around you who are gonna help you move forward and take steps in your journey, okay? And as you do, here's another thing to keep in mind, and this is travel tip number 2, okay? And travel tip number 2 is don't travel with strangers. Don't travel with strangers. Now, this started when you were a little kid and somebody probably told you, don't talk to strangers, right? And then you got a little older and it was, don't take candy from strangers. And then it became, don't put strangers in your car. And that's great advice, except the problem is, I'm gonna guess probably nobody ever stopped to define what a stranger is for you. Like, is it just people I don't know, or how does this work? And so I wanna define a stranger for you this morning. I tried to keep it simple. I've got a definition for you. It's just this, a stranger is someone who's strange. It's pretty easy. But there's a problem with that too, and the problem is, you're a little strange. And so am I. And so I've brought in the definition for you, okay? Here you go. A stranger is someone who is stranger than you. Wherever you are on the strange meter, they're just a little further, okay? That's a stranger. Now, here's what this means. Don't travel with strangers means you gotta know who's in the car with you, and you gotta make sure they're not creepy. And you gotta make sure they're not trying to lead you to another direction or another destination. You gotta make sure that it's not just that they have shared values, but that they care about you and not just about themselves. And here's why this is so important. It's important because the healthier you are, the more helpful you can be to other people. And just like you need people in your life to help you get where you wanna go, somebody else needs you in their life to help them get where they need to go. We need each other. And the healthier you are, the more helpful you can be. And so maybe you're saying, Jimmy, oh man, like if I'm supposed to reach people for Jesus, but I'm not supposed to be friends with people that don't have my shared values, how is this supposed to work? And that, I want you to know that's not what I'm saying, but here's what I am saying, okay? I heard it put this way one time, that there are 3 circles of people in your life, and you pick where people go in each of these circles. The smallest circle, kind of in the center, if you picture it like a target, right? The smallest circle would be like a circle of intimacy. That's no more than 2 or 3 or 4 people who are the people you're closest to in the world. If you're married, your spouse should be in that circle. Those are the people that you are closest to, and you have a high degree of influence in their life, and they have a high degree of influence in your life. And you can't fit everybody in that circle. It's a small circle. And then a little bit wider, you have a circle of influence. And those are people that are close enough to you that they can influence you, or they can pour into you, or they can speak into your life. And you can pour into and speak into their life. But that, again, you can only fit so many people in there. So it's like maybe 10, maybe 12 people. If you're in a life group, maybe it's your life group. But it's just a few more people. And then a little broader than that, you have the circle of care. And that's where people go who maybe you care about them and you want to influence them, but you realize that if they influence you, it may just pull you off course. And so you have to keep them in the right circle in your life so that they don't influence you in a negative enough way that they have an unhealthy impact on your life. And here's one way you can identify this. If you have anybody in your life who is causing you to doubt yourself or to doubt Jesus, they're a stranger. And more than likely what you need to do is you need to stop the car, you need to pull over, you need to get out, and you need to invite them out of your car, okay? And it's never not awkward. If you're close enough to somebody that they can influence your life and you have to say, I'm sorry, you can't be an influence in my life anymore, I gotta invite you out of my journey, that is never not awkward. But it's so important because the healthier you are, the more helpful you can be to other people. And that's so important. So don't travel with strangers. So let me just ask you, do you have any strangers in your life? Is there anybody you need to invite out of your journey? Number 3, choose a destination and borrow a map. Let me bring you all the way back to the question I asked in the beginning. Where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want your life to look like? So every season of life is a new season. It requires a different set of skills, whether it's like you're single or you're dating or you're married. Maybe you have kids. Maybe you're single again. Maybe you're dating again. Whatever it is, like every season of life is a new season. It requires a different set of skills. And what I've found is you get into a season that's a new thing and you don't have the skills or the tools or the knowledge for that season. And just about the time you figure it out, all of a sudden you realize I'm in a new season, right? And so what you need to do is figure out what season of life you're in, and then find somebody who's navigated that season of life well and ask them for their map. And the way to do this, let me give you some advice. Unless you're joining our mentoring program, which is a great thing, so don't think I'm knocking that, don't ask somebody to mentor you because that sounds like a chore, okay? Here's the secret. Let me give you the trick, okay? Go to somebody who has the knowledge you need. They've got the map that you want to borrow, right? They've navigated the season you're in. And you just say, hey, if I buy you coffee, if I buy you breakfast, can I ask you 3 questions? And most people will say yes. And then you go to that meeting and you have the 3 questions ready, man. You know exactly what you want to ask to get the knowledge that you need to get. You come prepared and you ask those questions, and like a sponge, you just soak it in. And then as you're leaving, you say, thank you so much. Hey, in the future, if I buy you breakfast or coffee again, could I just ask you 3 more questions? And most people will say yes. And now you got yourself a mentor, but don't tell them or you're going to scare them off, okay? Find somebody who's navigated the season of life you're in and borrow the map. Ask them to teach you what they know. Remember, Proverbs chapter 15, this important verse, without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. I heard somebody say this one time, that wisdom is not knowing all the answers. Wisdom is knowing what you don't know and having the humility to ask somebody who does. So what do you not know that you need to know? Find somebody who knows it and ask them to tell you. So, don't travel alone. Don't pick up strangers. Choose a destination and borrow a map. And if you will follow those travel tips, I'll bet that your odds of reaching your destination will increase. So let me come back and ask you this question. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? You got to set a goal, because if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. It's an old saying, but it's true. If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? And then ask this question. Who has God placed in your path that can help you get there? Or who has God brought into your life that can help you navigate the season that you're in? Or who is God surrounding you with? And maybe you haven't even seen it yet because you haven't been paying attention. But who is God surrounding you with that's there just for the season that you're in to help you make it through? If your answer to that question, by the way, is unknown or unclear, let me just tell you that we want to help you find those people. Maybe what you need to do is, I say this every week when I preach, I'll probably say it every week when I preach until Jesus comes back, if I'm still preaching, you need to get in a life group. Because those are those people. There they are. You need that. But we want to help you find those people. Maybe today at 12:30, here in a little over half an hour, maybe you need to go to First Step. If you've been around here a while and you want to meet some people and find out how to get plugged in, get that community in your life. But who has God put around you to help you navigate the season that you're in? Because I'll bet somebody's there and you just got to pay attention. And all of a sudden they just kind of like, there they are. And so here's what I want to challenge you to do. This week, I want you to evaluate your life in 5 areas: your faith, your family, your friends, your fitness, and your finances. Faith, family, friends, fitness, finances. And I want you to ask yourself, where am I and where do I want to be? And who can I ask for some help along the way? And then this week, my challenge to you is this. In one of those 5 areas, and if you're ambitious, go for all 5. I know we got overachievers in the room. But for the rest of us, pick one and find somebody and ask them one question. Take one step. Be intentional. And begin a new habit in your life of gaining wisdom from other people, because without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. So surround yourself with those people, and you will find your odds of reaching your destination are going to increase quite a bit. And that's what we want for you. And so Brian's going to continue this series next week as we talk about the next step in the journey. But you're not going to be ready for that if you don't set some goals. And then later, we're going to talk about how to protect yourself from injury and how to minimize your odds of being taken out of the game by injury. And we're going to talk about what it looks like to play the game hard. And we're going to talk about what it looks like to leave a legacy behind you. You know, we live in a city where we literally are spending all weekend celebrating people for just that. But we want you to have that kind of impact for Jesus Christ. And so I just want to encourage you to tune in for the rest of this series, because, man, if you want to live a life that's legendary, if you want to leave a legacy, I think that at the end of this thing, you're going to have a much better idea of how to do that. You're going to have a plan, okay? That's what we want for you. Let me pray. God, thanks for your word. Thanks for your promises. Give us wisdom as we pick our friends, and surround us with people to help us navigate these seasons in our lives. And God, through all of that, may we see you more clearly. May we follow you better, and may we leave a legacy in your name.